Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Matthew Moynihan doing the 6-month update of the Fusioneers Handbook. For those who aren't familiar, we are writing a book for Nature-Spriniger. Draft is due in April 30th of 2021. For links to the 7-month, 8-month, and 9-month update, please see the comments below. So there are 6 goals for this book. The first is an accurate description of nuclear fusion in plain English for the general public. That's what I like to say. So we're going for accuracy, clarity, and when I mean clarity, I mean we're going to explain this with cartoons or artwork as opposed to mathematical derivations, something that visual spatial learners can pick up on. This is a Big Ten approach, so we're including 8 different fusion families of approaches. In fact, the format is 1 chapter, 1 family of fusion approach explained in plain English. We're going to be addressing gaps in the public knowledge. So this is geared towards the general public, the layman. For those of us who are grad students and couldn't explain to our family members over Thanksgiving dinner what we did in fusion grad school, this is to try to help you explain to your family and friends. And we're going to be celebrating fusion history and fusion champions. A fusion champion I define as someone who spent 30, 40 years of their professional career working on one fusion approach. And since this is 2020, 2021, we're going to be mentioning and discussing the fusion startups that exist. As a side, I have a little flowchart here from the work this month. We were working on plasmoids, so I made this little flowchart of 5 different plasmoids that are going to be discussed in Chapter 7, which we're writing. So the updates from last month was we got feedback from Dr. Blair Bromley. Dr. Blair Bromley is a senior nuclear engineer at the Chalk River facility in Canada. And he got a chance to look over some of the book and had some nice things to say. Also, some nice feedback over the content. We got some technical comments back from Mr. Tanner Horn of Horn Technologies out in Colorado. Tanner is an expert in vacuum systems, superconducting systems, and some plasma systems. So it was nice to get some technical feedback from him. Chapter 1 right now is with Fred Bortz, my co-author, who is reformatting the introduction to be a little bit smoother transition for new folks. Chapter 6, the Tokamak chapter, is now in review. That's the big accomplishment. That's probably the biggest accomplishment from this month. If you were following the last update, we were working on the Tokamak chapter. Well, now it's out for technical review, and I'm going to be talking about that. And then Chapter 7, the Plasmoid chapter, we are working on that. Okay, so the Tokamak chapter, it's out. It's such a relief. It is currently with Commonwealth Fusion Systems for its first pass technical review. The chapter clearly is fundamentally positive on tokamaks, and it states unequivocally that tokamaks are in the pole position for a fusion power plant. Now, that's not to say that there aren't good ideas and good technology elsewhere. In fact, part of the mission of this book is to try to open up the general public to all the other concepts that exist other than tokamaks. The chapter is fundamentally supportive of compact superconducting tokamaks, and a great deal of material is dedicated to that. But it does discuss the history of ITER and mentions all the big work that's going on there in a positive light. So the schedule for this 22 pages of material is it's going to be with Commonwealth from November 5th to mid-December. And then once we receive it back, it's going to go for its second review with the folks at Tokamak Energy vis-a-vis Melanie Rinridge. We're sending it to Tokamak because we used images from ST40 CAD images, and we use that as the basic primer for all Tokamak engineering. So the reader is going to learn Tokamak engineering through ST40, i.e. what the center column is, the polyidal coils, the toroidal field coils, etc. Okay, so while that is out for review, I'm working on Chapter 7. This is the last rewrite of chapters that need to be done. This chapter was initially focused exclusively on FRCs, but when we took a second look at it, the outline really didn't make sense because there was a set of content that just didn't fit that was closely related because it was all plasma structures. So we reformatted around the concept of a plasma structure chapter, and then we just used the word plasmoid. So it's called the Plasmoids chapter right now. The chapter is about 35% completed based on the outline. We set up the outline, and now we're plugging in a lot of content that was already written for the previous version, and then filling in the gaps for what is missing. But it's going to start with an introduction. It goes into what a plasmoid is, the concept of forming a structure out of plasma. It provides that overview chart that I showed earlier. And then the first one the reader learns about is the FRC, what the concept is and how it was discovered. Then we introduce Spheromax as a comparison, and then we introduce Rotamax as a comparison. Of course, Rotamax have that fundamental concept where you hit it with a rotating magnetic field such that the electrons move, but not the ions, as an initial way to start up the FRC. So we talk about that. And then we dip into the history. We start with Ewan Jones' work at Flinders University on Rotamax, and then transition to the large S experiment at Los Alamos, talk about how that LSX was funded and built for 4 years, and then after it was finished, they shut it down a year later. So that's government funding for you. And how that was salvaged by Alan Hoffman and John Slough and brought to the Redmond Plasma Physics Laboratory at Seattle, University of Washington. And then I sort of talk about the make, move, hold approach to generating an FRC. You make an FRC, you move an FRC to a place where it's more easily stabilized, and then you create fields that stabilize the FRC using some trick. That leads naturally into MSNW through John Slough's story and talking about the FRC rocket. And then that make, move, hold stuff is a nice way to get into TAA, because that's roughly the way that they create their Spheromax. They create two side Spheromax, move them into the center, merge them, and then sustain them with particle beams. So that's all I've got written so far. The chapter eventually I hope to have include the PFRC at Princeton, the Compact Fusion Systems team, the concept of helicity and helicity space, and then of course from helicity we're going to dive right into the Dynamac from the University of Washington. All right, so that's about all the updates we have. Hope everyone's doing well. Take care.